Okay, so in the last class we discussed about different types of diversities, including genetic diversity and the ecosystem or the community diversity, and about the species diversity, right? And then we also took some examples where we try to understand what is the difference between these diversities and what is the significance of these diversities. We also discussed about two measuring scales on Simpson's and Shannon measurement index, with the help of which we are able to measure the diversity. Okay, the third type of diversity, which combines both measuring the evenness or the richness in the diversity and the abundance in the diversity. Okay, okay, okay. So now we come to what are the values of biodiversity. Okay, wait a second. Okay, just give me a second. Wait. Okay. Okay. Now, we have already discussed about values of resources as a whole. Okay, when we were discussing about in our unit resources, so there in general we discussed about what are the values of resources. Now, biodiversity is also one form of resource. Okay, is a type of a resource. So when we talk about values of biodiversity, we will take the same points, but our focus will be more on the different flora and fauna and what are the values and the importance they are of. Okay, so this is broadly categorized into four types of economic, biological, social, and cultural value. Now, economic value is further divided into consumptive value, that is, the resources which we are getting from the biodiversity, either in the form of flora or in the form of fauna, which we are directly consuming, that is consumptive value. And the productive value implies that we are changing the consumptive or these products and processing them into different products, and then we are using them. For example, wood. Now, wood can be changed into a timber, and then it is used for preparing the furnitures. That is a productive value. And the fruits, the vegetables that we are eating directly, that we are getting from the nature, that is your consumptive value. Okay. Now, in this productive and in productive values also comes the medicines, the drugs, and your like for example penicillin. Now it is obtained from, this is an antibiotic which is obtained from a fungus. Okay. Now, isabgol, which we generally take when we have bowel troubles, that is obtained from the husk of plant known as plantago. Okay. Similarly, we have a bacteria known as tetracycline. For treating malaria, the quinine drug is obtained from the from the bark of a tree known as cinchona. Okay, so we can see that the plants, the trees, the flora and the fauna, they have a lot amount of consumptive value. They give us a lot amount of consumptive value, and in the productive use is mostly for the commercial purpose. That also forms the part of GDP of our nation. Okay, or the GDP of any system. Okay, so that can be produced, that can be marketed, that can be sold. So this includes the paper and the pulp industry, the plywood industry, the industries like that of silk industry, the textile industry is there, and and then there are drug industry. So they are all the productive value in the part of your economic value. Okay. Now, next come is your biological value. Okay, now the biological value is when we obtain a seed bank from them. Okay, so for example, the animals can be are used for like in the olden times in the farming practices, the ox, they were used for cultivating the fields, and the like in the fisheries, the fishes were used for like of course as a food and the other purposes. So these are all the biological values of the biodiversity, and this not only contains the animals, but they also contain plants. Like for example, we get gene bank in the form of different varieties of the seeds from for the agricultural purposes. So I hope you remember that video which I had showed on the Prabhakaran Rao, where I discussed about how he is preparing those gene bank of different varieties of the same species, for example, of the tomato and the other and vegetables. So that is the biological value of the biodiversity. Third comes as the social value. Now this is divided into the ethical value and the aesthetic value. So the when it comes to ethical value, so the concept is based on that all life must be preserved, and because nature have created them, so the concept should be live and let live. Okay, in this way, the effect is that we avoid becoming quite self-centered when we are obtaining the values, or when we are looking at the biodiversity as a resource. Okay, so of course, because it is composed of other living beings also, and other animals and flora also. So as an individual, they too take the resources or share of the resource from that entire environment or from the biodiversity. So in that ways it needs to be looked, so that forms the ethical value. And based on this ethical value, and the importance of the biodiversity, we'll see that it became an important part in mobilizing and in creating awareness and in sensitizing people towards the conservation of biodiversity. Okay, now aesthetic value. Okay, now of course, biodiversity gives us pleasure, it gives us peace of mind, and we feel the feeling of appreciation, and we go for when we are exhausted, we like to go in the nature's arms. So those are all the significance or the aesthetic value of the biodiversity. Okay, now the cultural value is also very important because it contains the study of some of the sacred groves and the tribal communities who through their traditional practices are valuable source, not only in conserving those forests where they are living, but also as a repository to the huge amount of valuable information in the traditional practices there. Okay, so they have both the spiritual value and the psychological value. So that is there in the cultural value part. Okay. Mm, and what else means? What examples more can tell? Okay, so even the construction of the botanical gardens and geological gardens, okay, which are meant both for the conservation of the species, they also serve as the aesthetic value, which is a part of your social value to the values of biodiversity. Okay, now when it comes to the the psychological values of the biodiversity, then this getting relieved and getting peace by, or having peace in the nature's arm. When we want to go alone, we spend some time there, we want to think. So those are the psychological part of the culture that adds to the cultural value of the towards the biodiversity. Okay, and then there are certain idioms and the what should we say, the small stories that have been taken, that have taken examples from the nature, in terms of like when it comes to teaching us about strength, or when it comes to not to give up. So they take examples like from the rivers or from the trees. So these are all the part the psychological value, from time to time we see that the people have taken examples from the nature, and they have mentioned about in the psychological aspects or psychological value of the biodiversity. Okay. Okay, so this is the holistic picture of what biodiversity is giving us, what are the losses that have been made to the biodiversity, and as a result, what are the repercussions of the same. Okay, so we have already discussed about the genetical diversity, the the community diversity, and your species diversity in terms of species richness, in terms of Shannon index and the Simpson index. And then we also talked about the value, like, for example, biodiversity enhances the efficiency of ecological processes, because when we talked about biogeochemical cycle and in ecology, that is also part of your biodiversity. Nutrients that are coming back to the soil at different trophic levels, different organisms, they are playing role in maintaining the ecological processes, in managing the functional traits, which creates the diversity in the body. Say, for example, in the pollinators. Okay, so it creates diversity in the body sizes of the pollinators, depending upon the external factors like the distances of the reach to the crop, or the type of the climatic situation, climate they are in, and that promotes the biodiversity. So that is why we see that in the tropical rainforest, where the temperature is high, the trees, the vegetation is thick and rich, that the biodiversity is also rich, because that base level of the tropic, that is the producer level, there the biomass production is huge, and as a result of that, the what we when I discussed about that the Blackman's law, we found that stronger the base of the tropic level, greater the base of the tropic level, greater the number of different tropic levels will be there in that ecosystem or in that food chain. And more diverse the food web, more stable, more diversified that ecosystem is. Okay, so the tropical rainforests are one of the richest
हाँ.
sources in terms of biodiversity and in species richness. Okay, so now, after understanding in general about what is biodiversity, let's understand how is India been seen as in terms of biodiversity of its nation, and in terms of the biodiversity. Now, out of the total countries that have been set to be as mega diverse, okay, Nisha, ठीक है, I have noted your text. So India is 12 amongst the one of the 12 top mega diverse nations of the globe, and it although it covers only 2.5% of the total world's area, yet it contains and it counts for 7 to 8% of the total endemic species. Okay, and I've already discussed about what is the difference between endemic species, exotic species, and the alien species. Have I discussed about them? But have I discussed about the differences between the endemic species, the exotic and the alien species? Anyone? Anyone, beta? बेटा मैंने पहले डिस्कस किया है कि नहीं एपिडेमिक सॉरी एंडेमिक एंड keystone species, endemic species, and all these. Okay, fine. Then I'll no, because these are important concepts. Because when I'll describe about biodiversity more, you will understand. I'll keep using these terms like endemic species and endemism. Okay, because that is also one of the key measurement about the species richness. Okay, so endemic species are the species whose origin and their ancestors belong to that same area. Okay, so say for example, if I say Royal Bengal tiger, now that is endemic, that is also known as native to that region, because their source of origin, their ancestors, they are belong to that region. That is known as our endemic species. Okay. Now, exotic species implies any species they come from outside, either they invade or they accidentally happen to fall in that region. Okay, those are known as your exotic species. Now, listen to this very very um, now this is very important. Okay, now when I say exotic species, depending upon the behavior of that species, there are two ways that that foreign invading species will respond. Either it will mix with other species and it will grow in symbiotic relationship with everyone, or it will dominate or it will try to dominate the other species. Okay, or third, it won't sustain. Now, if both sustain in that new region, then of course that species will end there, that there is no question of coining it as exotic species. I'm talking about those species that will डेवलप जो वहां पर बच जाएंगे. अब उसमें से दो तरीके से होंगे. एक वो स्पीशीज होंगे जो बाकी के स्पीशीज के साथ में एक कमेंसल और एक सिम्बायोटिक रिलेशनशिप बनाकर रहेंगे, और देयर माइट बी सम डेलीटीरियस स्पीशीज जो डोमिनेट करके वहां की दूसरी लोकल स्पीशीज को खत्म कर सकते हैं. Those species are known as your alien species. Okay, so alien species is a negative form of the exotic species, which will invade which will invade in the foreign land, and they will destroy all the local species that are present there. Okay, so now 7 to 8% of endemic species in one small country implies it has huge richness. Now, in terms of the greatest number of species, Amazon River Basin, followed by one in the Congo Basin, and this region of Bolivia, which is there in the close to Indonesia, they are the richest one, followed by India. Okay, because these are the common thing that is there in all of these regions is that they have tropical rainforest, and because of that they have huge amount of biomass, different amount of different species, and variation in the natural factors, as a result of which there is huge amount of biodiversity. So that particular forest, or that region that has greater number of endemic species implies there the biodiversity is rich. ठीक है, मतलब उसका ये है कि वहां पर ज्यादा नंबर ऑफ स्पीशीज वो हैं जिनका ओरिजिन वहीं का है और वो दूसरी और कहीं पे नहीं पाए जा रहे हैं. Now that is an important factor, that that particular species is there itself, मतलब वो वहीं पर ही है और पूरी दुनिया में कहीं नहीं है. Now that becomes very important in terms of their conservation, in also in terms of their sensitivity towards getting extinct. Okay, so that is why endemic or endemic species and the count and the calculation towards endemism is very important, because it also gives the measurement about the sensitivity of that forest and that ecosystem towards getting extinct. Okay, so India has greatest one of it is the country which has one of the greatest number of endemic species. Okay, so we talk about it in terms of data or in terms of figures. 45,000 species of plants are there which are endemic. I'm not talking about the types of species that are there. Species bahar se bhi ho sakte hain, but these are the endemic species. Okay, we will learn more about them when we will discuss about the threats and loss to the biodiversity. Then we will talk about the invasive species, also known as your alien species, which are harmful or which had deleterious effect on the local species. Okay, and these recorded number of endemic species are just 10% of what have been identified. 90% are still unexplored, and out of them several are one जिनके बारे में हमें पता भी नहीं है, and they have already become extinct. And that is because of the pressure, and that is because of one of the impact of the climate change, with which the natural factors are getting changed and the animal species are getting extinct. Okay, so if we apply the Robert May's global estimate, so he said that only 1/4 of the total species have been identified. Rest 3/4 of the species are still need to be figured out, and we still don't know. We don't have any counting of them. Okay. Um. Okay. Wait. Um, Okay. So now we come to a very, very important part. That is, what are the losses to biodiversity or threats to biodiversity? Now listen this very, very carefully, because question first thing is, this is 100% sure one or the other question has to come from unit 4, this unit. Okay. Second thing is, there are 3 to 4 types of questions that they will ask. First is, either they will ask the question on the value of the biodiversity, whose chances are come. Mostly they ask about the losses or threats to the biodiversity, or they take 2 to 3 points of the 3 important and major reasons of the threats to biodiversity, and then they ask you to elaborate them in detail using proper case study. Fourth is, they will ask you the question, they may ask you the question on what are the repercussions because of this loss and threats to the biodiversity, what are the other damages. And fifth important is, they may ask you the question on the conservation strategies, what are the different types of conservation methods by which the biodiversity can be protected, and what are the initiatives taken by the government. Okay, so when it comes to the initiative taken by the environment, the administration, there you have to mention about CBD, Biodiversity Act, the roles and the goals of the Biodiversity Act, and then you have to connect its dots by what are the goals and how those goals have been practiced, either in by bringing them in the form of the projects, like for example tiger conservation projects, vulture breeding programs, etc. So in that way you are supposed to answer your questions. Is it clear? बेटा यहाँ तक किसी को कोई डाउट? Any doubts so far?
No, ma'am.
Fine, fine, fine. Okay. So now we come to the very, very important part. That is, what are the causes to the threats to biodiversity or losses to biodiversity? So Edward Wilson gave a very good term of hippo. It's easy to learn hippo. Hippo here is a hippopotamus. Hippopotamus. Okay. जिसे हम दरियाई घोड़ा भी कहते हैं. Okay. Now hippo stands for H for habitat destruction and fragmentation, I and H for human wildlife conflicts. So there are two meaning of H: habitat destruction and fragmentation, and human wildlife conflict. Okay. I for invasive species, very important factor. Okay. Third, pollution and population, and poaching and hunting. Okay. Another P is poaching and hunting, and O is over harvesting. Okay. Now, other two important things, which are the recent one, are the co-extinction and climate change. So I hope now you can learn it again. From H, there are two terms: habitat destruction and fragmentation, human wildlife conflicts. Okay. From I is invasive species. From these two P's, we have three things: pollution, population, and poaching and hunting. O is over harvesting. And the other two, which are the recent one impacts, that are the climate change and co-extinction. Okay. Now, in all these points, sometimes they focus on these three things: okay, habitat destruction and fragmentation, invasive species, and poaching and hunt. I'm very sorry. They focus majorly on two important points. These are your poaching and hunting and human wildlife conflicts. ठीक, ज़्यादातर क्वेश्चंस में अगर वो आपको बायोडाइवर्सिटी में सारे थ्रेट्स नहीं पूछेंगे, तो कभी कभी वो सिर्फ इन्हीं दो को उठा के बोलेंगे, इनको डिटेल में एक्सप्लेन करो, क्या इनके रीजंस है, और इनके केस स्टडी से आप इन चीज़ों को प्रूव करो. ठीक, तो poaching and hunting and human wildlife conflicts are very, very important. Okay, so in coming slides, I'll show you and I'll give you the reasons, and I'll discuss about the case studies in support of them. Okay. Okay, so let's come to the habitat fragmentation and habitat destruction. Okay, now habitat fragmentation or destruction means कि एक running forest area के बीच में आप ऐसी activity करो, either that is meant for agricultural purposes or you create some resident area. Now definitely residential purposes के लिए means, for example, creating huts is not that easy because they fear for their lives. Of course, that is the continuing part on the center part of the forest. So not likely chances, they will definitely be invaded by the animals also, wilds also. But for the agricultural purposes, of course, they are using it. Okay. So what is fragmentation? That continuous area is broken down into smaller pieces. Okay. And this is one of the greatest threat because it breaks the continuity of the region. Now, what are the causes for this fragmentation? Agricultural lands that I have told. construction activity. Now, this has a huge role. Now, the roads, not just roads, railways also, mining purposes, and the urbanization. Okay, so the chief cause is the agricultural land. Second is the construction activity. Third is the mining, and the fourth is the urbanization. Okay, now let's take a few case studies of all these causes. ठीक, agricultural land में कोई case study लेने का जरूरत नहीं because it's almost in most of the regions. Okay, and I've taken an example. Now this is an image that is showing the tea region used for tea plantation. This is in the Western Ghat, and that this is the tiger reserve, the Kallagat tiger reserve that is located in the southern Western Ghat in Tamil Nadu. So we can see कंटिन्यूस फॉरेस्ट है आपके चारों तरफ. ये एक अलग से उन्होंने रीजन काटा, देखा होगा कि हाँ दिस इज ओके, सो दे हैव क्लियर द फॉरेस्ट एंड दे आर नाउ यूजिंग इट. नाउ जस्ट इमेजिन दिस वाज ऑलरेडी दिस प्रीवियसली दिस वाज द कंटिन्यूस लैंड. नाउ एनिमल्स मस्ट बी गोइंग हियर एंड देयर. अभी भी है उनकी आदत. अभी उनके लिए और भी अच्छा हो गया क्योंकि नाउ दे हैव एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड, सो दे हैव गुड अमाउंट ऑफ फूड आल्सो. Now they will be invaded by different herbivores. Now, when herbivores will invade, now definitely that farmer who had raised that with their hard work and labor, when they will see that their crop has been devastated and has been destroyed or have been eaten by the animals, that we will see will cause the human-wildlife conflicts. Okay. Now, the example of this the road or this mining practices, there is this one recently reported in the Dihang Patkar Reserve. Okay, this is in Assam. This has recently been announced as the national park. पहले national park नहीं था, reserve था. Now it has been coined as national park. This is known as Dibang. अभी इसमें क्या है कि पहले बहुत सालों से illegal coal mining चल रहा था. ठीक. Recently, Coal CIL, there is Coal India Limited, they file an affidavit where they requested that this much amount of area needs to be provided to them as it is a potent ground for coal mining. Okay, the of course जो वहाँ के local environmentalists थे, they filed the case in NGT. NGT is National Green Tribunal. Case वहाँ पर गया, सुनाई हुआ. होने के बाद में what they have done, they came up with the conclusion that ठीक है, according to the EIA points, this region is out of the national park and therefore it is safe to conduct mining activity there. The environmentalists, however, had a different reason. They told first thing is already a lot amount of illegal mining practices were happening there since long time, which had been unnoticed. Okay, that need to be addressed. And second, the land which CIL is claiming for the mining is actually very close to national park. So if any such mining activity will be carried on, that is definitely going to affect the animals and the biodiversity of that region. Later, however, among all these controversies of yes, no, all the cases, later the CIL was given some amount of land to begin with the mining activity on coal. However, the case is still going, and I think शायद से अभी it's on stay. ठीक है. Now the reason the how the construction activities are going to affect, often we hear कि railway line से जो है हाथियों का दल गुजरा था and we've been smashed up by the trains. Okay, or the 14 to 15 elephants had died. But that is also the cause and the consequence of the loss in the biodiversity. Okay. Now, the invasive or the alien species, very important. So we have just a few minutes back we have discussed about the aliens, the exotic species. Now, these are the species that are definitely not native to an ecosystem. Now, the question is how they have invaded. They have invaded either they have in search of food, या फिर जिस जगह पर होंगे there they have faced some stress either in the form of maybe some disease, maybe shortage of resource, maybe some flood, famine, natural calamity. Okay, or they have accidentally came up. Okay? Now, how humans have played this role in bringing this invasive species, especially during this import and export of the transportation process. Okay, so we will give you an example where how during this transportation of the product, some of the alien species had invaded and they are still growing and we see them in profuse amount. Okay, so for example, now Burmese python. Okay, now they are actually in Myanmar. Burma is the old name of Myanmar. Now, by walking and because of the pressure on the resources, they have invaded the glades. Glades are the grasslands, okay, of Arunachal and the northeastern regions. Okay. Now, these pythons, they are like they can invade and they can eat almost the animals as big as deer. Okay. And not just that, even the alligators. Alligators are the species of crocodiles. Okay. So they can virtually eat many animals. Okay, so once they have invaded those everglades, they have created a lot of pressure as they are eating lot amount of killing the local species or the native species that belong to those everglades. Okay, there is another example of bullfrogs. Okay, they have introduced in Andaman Nicobar, and they are invasive in nature. And these bullfrogs, they are almost eating all the most of the native wildlife species of fishes and lizards. Okay, and so this is also an example of the invasive or the alien species. So this is a list of the different invasive and the alien species that are there in India. So those were the case study and examples of the animal species. There are several plant species also. I'll give you some example. Water hyacinth, जिसे हम पानी जलकुंभी बोलते हैं, अगर आप गांव में जाओगे तो आप देखोगे वहां पर गांव में जब ये जलकुंभी आ जाती है तो इमीडिएटली दीज विलेजर्स दे क्लियर इट बिकॉज दे नो कि ये इतना ज्यादा जंगली है कि एक बार पानी में पड़ गया तो ये फटाफट ग्रो करता है. Okay, so this water hyacinth is actually belongs to tropical America. Okay, and now it's found in India and almost आप जहाँ पर भी एक तो आप algae का carpet देखते हो, another that floating plant is this water hyacinth. Okay, so this is a nuisance for aquatic ecosystem because it creates a problem of the decline in the oxygen content of the water body. Okay, पार्थीनियम जिसे हम गाजरी घास भी बोलते हैं, जंगली हर जगह दिखता है. ठीक है, I don't know if you have seen the picture or have you seen गाजरी घास जिसे हम पार्थीनियम ग्रास भी बोलते हैं. Has anyone seen this पार्थीनियम grass? गाजरी घास किसी ने देखी है?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Okay, otherwise I would have shown picture. Yeah, Janvi, you want to share something?
Its appearance. Ma'am, basically, we grow carrots in our field. The leaves of that grass, ma'am, in Hindi we say it pathri like somewhat. So उसकी
Right,
yes मैम, तो उसकी लीव्स भी मैम थोड़ी वैसी ही होती हैं जैसे
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
गाजर के उसकी गाजर की जो प्लांट होती है जैसे उसकी लीव्स होती हैं तो मतलब बहुत थोड़ा सा ही फर्क होता है दोनों में.
Right, right, right,
Uh,
right, exactly. Very good, very good. Yeah. Okay, so I think Janvi has got it really well. And this gajri घास, which is known as a Parthenium grass, हर जगह आपको खेतों में, सड़क के किनारे, और इतना वेल थ्राइविंग और एग्रेसिव कॉलोनाइजर है कि even if there is dearth of water, दूसरी species देख सकती है, but it's there. Okay? So this again has came from tropical North America. Okay, then Indian bullfrog, I have already told that this was in the Andaman and Nicobar, and this is uh, and native to the mainland India, but now it's there in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Okay, now Lantana camara, ठीक, जिसे हम जंगली फूल बोलते हैं, इसका कलरफुल फूल होता है, इसकी पत्ती बहुत रफ होती है. एक फूल ऐसा लगता है जैसे कई ढेर सारे छोटे छोटे फूलों से बना हुआ है. ओके, दैट इज एक्चुअली एन इनफ्लोरेसेंस. नाउ दैट हैज केम फ्रॉम साउथ अमेरिका. ओके, एंड दिस इट्स फ्रूट्स आर वेरी टॉक्सिक. लाल कलर का बेरी जैसा फूल होता इसका होता है फल दिखने में, looks very attractive, but that's very toxic. Especially जो आपके elephant और deer हैं, वो इनको भी खा जाते हैं, and sometimes they lose and they succumb to these toxic herbs. Okay, so these are some of the examples of your invasive or the alien species. So next we come to is
Excuse me, ma'am.
yes, bolo Akshi.
Ma'am, actually, I want to ask what is the difference between the migrate species and invasive species?
They are, see, that is what I have told, that when the exotic species or the species that are coming from outside, there are two ways. Either they are moving willingly from their place because some stress has happened, either in terms of natural factors or in terms of resources. Okay, and what are these stresses? Like, for example, some natural calamity happens, maybe a shortage of food is happening, a drought or famine has happened, some disease outbreak has happened. In that case, the animals will shift from that land to the another piece of land or to the another forest. That is, those are your migratory animals, okay, migratory birds or species. Okay, now that migration is not necessary that they will become alien or invasive to that region. That's what I had already told. Okay, they will develop a commensal or the symbiotic relationship with the other species. Okay, in that case, they are not the invasive species there. Now, in case of the species who have landed in that region mostly accidentally. Now, all these invasive species, which are the exotic, the harmful species who have a deleterious effect on the local species there, they are mostly due to the accidental thing. Okay, or in case there are certain species which have migrated in those places, if they somehow started dominating the other local species, then in that case they become the invasive species. So this is the difference between your migratory species and your invasive species. And second important thing is, migratory species don't mostly they don't settle in those regions. Okay? They are just shifting in those regions for the temporary period of time. Once that stress in that their old home that is over, they mostly prefer to return back. For example, migratory birds or the Siberian cranes are concerned. So during extreme winters in the parts of Siberia, in the northern parts of Russia, during the springtime, they migrate here to India. They go for the breeding season is there. And once that is over and the summers are back, they will again go back to their home. Okay, but in case of invasive species, they will come, they will settle, and they will grow, and they will destroy all the other local species. They will almost dominate them. So that is the difference between your migratory species and the invasive species. Is it clear, beta?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay, anyone else?
Ma'am, we all have a question that where is our ma'am on when we all have our PPT
Hmm.
representation, ma'am. Could you
I'll share
please?
that soon. I'll share that soon, Pallavi. Okay,
Okay,
I'll
ma'am.
share that soon. Okay, fine. ठीक है. So next we come to is poaching and hunting. This is very very important क्योंकि in your exams sometimes the questions are asked on special focus to poaching and hunting. There they will ask you to describe that in detail, its impact on the loss to the biodiversity, and you have to support it by citing one or the other case study. Okay. So if we talk about the figures by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, that is of State of India's Environment in 2017. Now their figures are very worrying because they show that 52% of wildlife have um, um, have lost their life. I mean, there is 52% increase in the poaching and wildlife crimes in between 2014 and 2016. Okay, and if we talk about the precise figures, this is around 30,000 wild crimes in mortality and the killing of the wildlife. Okay, and around 400 species, or more than 400 species, have been illegally traded or poached out from the country. Okay, now this is all data. Okay, however, you have to give an example of 2 to 3 data at least in support of your in this question. Okay, if they ask you the question. Okay, so in 2016, around 50 tigers and 340 peacocks, they were killed and poached, which was increase in around 193% as compared to that of 2014. Okay, and there are certain studies also. Hope you have gone through this newspaper article where there's a special task force in New People had seized around 6,000 endangered soft shell and flap shell turtles who from a small house in Amethi. So they are all being poached through the borders of Nepal. So they were all being taken. However, they were identified by special task force, and there are several such incidences which have went unnoticed, which have resulted in the poaching and killing of these species. Okay. So here is a record, and this is very bad. 10 species are worstly affected because of this hunting and poaching. This includes, of course, leopard, elephant, and peacock. Even blue bull, that is nilgai, which we say, they have also been poached for their skin and for their meat. Okay, black buck, which is sacred to the Vishnu in Europe, they have been poached along for their meat, head, skin. Rhinoceros for their horn, and the tigers, spotted deer, wild boar. So these are the 10 top species in India who have severely and worst affected by this illegal hunting and poaching. Okay. So what are the reasons for this poaching and hunting? Okay, so definitely the major reason is the for making money. Okay, and second important reason is also poverty. Okay, so sometimes people are doing it out of their selfish motive to make more money, and others are, of course, the circumstances where people are pushed to take up this task of the poaching and hunting. Okay, and because by selling one species one can make money in a huge quantity, so people often take these risks, especially those who are affected by poverty. So that is also one of the main reasons for the poaching and hunting, which in turn is also responsible for the threat or the loss of the biodiversity. Okay. Now, the fourth important reason for the loss in the biodiversity is human-wildlife conflicts. Okay. Now, what are the driving forces for the human-wildlife conflicts? Growth in human population. As a result of that, the land acquisition, the encroachment of the forest area, converting them into the agricultural land, they have resulted in the human wildlife conflict. Now, when we are encroaching and we are entering in their domain, the habitat, which the part of the forest which is the habitat to those wildlife, definitely that will easily invite the incidences of more and more human wildlife conflict. Okay, as a result of this, and of course, the degradation and fragmentation has caused pressure on the food resources, have also resulted in human wildlife conflict because they have made the wild animals to come inside the villages or to the places from where, or invade agricultural land from where they can get food. So this has also resulted in the human wildlife conflicts. And um, um, uh, okay. Now there are also the climatic factors, which I have already told you that they are resulting in the migration of the animals. Also, they are also the promoting factors for human wildlife conflict. Like for example, some climatic factors like some disease broke out, or maybe some stochastic events like forest fires. So they all drive the animals to run towards the region, and because the forests are already fragmented with they are interfered, they are interrupted by the agricultural lands or by some huts or by villages. So easily these wildlife they encounter these head-to-head conflicts with the human beings. Okay, you can have more details link that I have shared on what are the reasons or what are the driving forces towards human wildlife conflicts. Okay, so as a result of the human wildlife conflicts, now what is the reason? What means what is happening in this human wildlife conflict? Okay. Now, once the wildlife and the humans they are in face to face with each other, now definitely both are fearing for the life, or one is needing the resources. Now, as a result, now say for example, um, a family loses their child or loses their family because of this conflict. Now, their anguish, pain, and anger will break out in an action which often leads to the killing of that animal. Okay, or say for example, if a farmer has came up with an agricultural produce. Okay, now an elephant or a nilgai that encroaches and eat and damages and destroys all his crop. Now that anguish and that pain will will be so strong that they will move to kill those animals. Okay, so And one of the recent examples is this killing of the elephant mother who was pregnant in Kerala, where she had invaded the villages and they destroyed the property. And in response to that, the group of local people have brutally killed the elephant. Okay, the question is whom should we blame here? Those humans, the animals? Okay, so and if we holistically see the problem, then of course the person who is seeing, okay, their family members are losing their life because they have confronted. Now they won't, at that point their mind is clouded. They won't think of this aspect that, okay, हमें उनकी region में नहीं जाना है, or we are there, we have met the tiger there and that they have killed, so it's our fault. Okay, now definitely they are also going into those regions, into the core of those forests in search of resources, either in search of wood. And on the other hand, now animals who are living in these forest regions, now because of the shortage of the food, they will try to come into the villages. Now they have a fresh cattle there, they have small babies there. So for them, it's an easy ground to take and capture the food from there. Now, all these things, they create this mutual fear and the mutual anger for each other, which increases these incidences. Okay, so according to one of the data and the surveys which were performed in the southern Indian state of Karnataka in the Bhadra Tiger Reserve, it was found that that around 12% of the total family livestock have been caused as a result of their encounters with these tigers and leopards. Okay. In another incident, 98 deaths of people have taken from since 2013 and 2017 because of the attacks from the tigers. Okay. Similarly, as a result of the attack from the elephants, around 3,000 lives have been lost since 2009 to 2016. Okay. So the question is, what should be the measurements? Apart from the awareness programs, governments have to incentivize them. Okay, they have to like for example, if especially the agricultural the farmers who have faced the loss in the form of the damage to their crops or in the form of the damage to their livestock being taken by the tiger or maybe by the carnivores. So they have, it means in case if they are assured that okay, they will receive some amount of incentive from the government or from the forest officials, then that will lessen their anger or their anguish, and they will add to some sort of security to their the fear, and hence the anger towards the killing the animals there. Okay, so some around 15 crores of investment has already been made in mitigating to reduce these conflicts. And the steps that have been taken to mitigate conflicts are both in the form of creating the boundaries so that the animals do not cross those boundaries and do not enter into the human habitation. On the other hand, through awareness programs, the human beings are also being taught that okay, these are the regions that are protected where these animals are living. We are not supposed to go in those regions or accidentally end up going into those regions. Okay. And then, of course, these incentives program, the participation towards the conservation through the conservation program, these information also help in reducing or mitigating these conflicts. So the structural mitigation measurements, like for creating these elephant-proof trenches or the solar-powered fences and the stone pitch trenches around the national parks or around the forest, prevents the animals to cross their boundaries and remain confined to the paths. Okay, so the corridors. Okay, now the corridors are one of the solution or the mitigating measurements that have been taken to solve the problem of fragmentation due to the construction activities like roads and railways, so that these elephants or the animals or the wild animals who lose their life because of these railway tracks or the roads, they can travel through these corridors and they can avoid this fragmentation in the forests. Okay, Now, similarly, there are other data where they show that, okay, in the Pilibhit district, the tigers in the 2014, but 2014, since 2014, these big cats, including the leopards and jaguars, they have killed the children and the other people, the human beings. Okay, so because of the people's unchecked intrusion into wildlife habitats and because of the changes in the land use pattern, it has actually led to the unprecedented increase in the human wildlife conflicts. Okay, so because of this tangible increase in the population on either sides, this has resulted in the disturbance in the peaceful cohabitation of the humans and the wildlife. Okay, and the humans have started seeing them as an enemies, and the animals, they have become very cautious, and they have also started seeing humans there as their enemies, with which these are the incidences of the man-animal conflicts are increasing. So because of this, there is a huge loss to the biodiversity and the decline in the number of species of the tigers, elephants, and these big cats. Okay. So this finishes your loss and threat section of the biodiversity. In the next class, we will discuss about the conservation